I suffer from medically diagnosed chronic depression. From my own experience, there's still a lot of awkwardness around it. If you haven't experienced depression, it's impossible to understand what it's like. Speaking of inability to understand, nearly all of my biblical commentaries in my library seem to misinterpret this proverb. And that might seem like a bold claim, but hear me out. Depression is an experience which is so foreign to most people that those experiencing it often feel unable to express what they're feeling. There's really nothing practical that Peter, James and John could do to help Jesus in this moment. But he just wanted them there. Shalom everyone. Grace, mercy and peace to each of you from God our Father and our Lord Jesus Christ. A glad heart makes a cheerful face, but by sorrow of heart is the spirit crushed. You might think of depression and mental health issues being a modern phenomenon, and there is evidence that these conditions are increasing in modern society. But here's a proverb about mental illness from over 3,000 years ago. And this is what I love about the Proverbs. They're gems of wisdom which have stood the test of time and are still valuable, even though the world in which this proverb was written looks vastly different to the world in which we live today. The human condition, the human experience at a fundamental level remain essentially the same, and so the value of these proverbs is timeless. At this point, I probably need to add a trigger warning of some sort. Some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today could be upsetting for some people. I suffer from medically diagnosed chronic depression, so I can empathise to some degree if you're afflicted with a mental illness. If you're in a bad place, do get help. I did, not as early as what I should have, but I've got to a place now where I can manage my depression. We live in a society that's really trying to destigmatise mental illness, and I think it's been partially effective. But from my own experience, there's still a lot of awkwardness around it. And I think a lot of the reason for that is that if you haven't experienced depression, it's impossible to understand what it's like. And even various people's experiences of depression can vary so much that even if you have experienced it, you might not really know exactly what another person is going through. There's also a difference between having felt depressed at some point in your life and having chronic depression. Those two are completely different things. And we'll see that this proverb is prompting us to think about all of these issues. Speaking of inability to understand, nearly all of my biblical commentaries in my library seem to misinterpret this proverb. And that might seem like a bold claim, but hear me out. The crux of this proverb for me is the contrast between face and spirit. A glad heart makes a cheerful face, but by sorrow of heart the spirit is crushed. This strikes at the heart of mental illness and the dangers of it. A glad heart makes a cheerful face. It's a natural part of the human experience to express our positive emotions externally in a visible way. If I'm happy, excited, pleased, satisfied, you'll be able to see it in my face. But if I'm experiencing sorrow of heart, you won't necessarily be able to observe that externally by looking at me. It's my spirit that's crushed, not my face or my body. And of course, in some cases, there will be external observable symptoms. But even then, they won't necessarily be an indicator of the extent of a person's suffering. I've been to 3 funerals of young men who have suicided, and in every case, there's been comment by those close to them that they either didn't realise that they were suffering, or they knew, but they didn't realise the extent to which they were suffering. And at least one of them was the kind of young bloke who was the life of the party. And so when one of my commentaries interpreted the phrase, "the spirit is broken," to mean, "and so the countenance is sad," I felt inclined to yell at the computer screen, "No, you idiot, it's the complete opposite." The proverb is structured in such a way as to make us understand that while our while our positive emotions will be seen externally, our spirit might be broken, but our countenance won't necessarily be sad. And like I said, most of my commentaries made the same mistake. And I think this partly stems from people broadly being unable to understand mental illness. Not all my commentaries did make that mistake though, and one commentary I've got, which is called Lang's, which is a very old commentary from 1872, he did note that instead of the outward effect, it's the inward cause which underlies it, which is named in the second clause. Sorrow of heart is a more acute suffering than sadness. And this for me reflects the difference between people who felt down or depressed at some point in their life and someone who suffers chronic depression. The Hebrew word translated sorrow is also frequently translated as suffering, wounds, and trouble. And it has a core meaning of pain, so that the New English translation chooses the translation, by a painful heart, the spirit is broken. There's an acuteness of internal pain described here that is beyond the normal ups and downs of life that everybody experiences. And yet still, that suffering can be internalised and hidden. The New International Commentary of the Old Testament cites of our Lewin's commentary on Proverbs, where he gives the translation, "A troubled heart quenches the spirit, so that one's vital energy cannot flow." And I like this idea of the sapping of vital energy. It has some basis in the Hebrew because the Hebrew word for spirit is ruach, which means breath. And I think it's a good description of what depression is. It saps the life out of your life. Like a lot of proverbs, this proverb is just an observation of a phenomenon, of an aspect of human experience. It doesn't tell us what to do with it. The application is in some sense implied, but we're being prompted to reflect on both what causes this phenomenon and what learning we can take away from it. And I think it's primarily for those who are close to mental health sufferers rather than those suffering themselves. I found a study published in a journal, World Psychiatry, and it was titled "The Lived Experience of Depression, a bottom-up review co-written by experts by experience and academics." It gives primacy and value to the lived experience of sufferers of mental illness. And under a section titled "Struggling with Communication," the study observed that depression is an experience which is so foreign to most people that those experiencing it often feel unable to express what they're feeling. This is certainly my experience. The study calls it a deep communicative obstacle. Unfortunately, the internalising of the experience of depression is a characteristic of the illness. Dr. Julie Smith, who's a clinical psychologist, has a great book, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? And there's a chapter in here called How to Support Someone. It has lots of helpful tips, and they're listed in a dot point format. This is number 1. When we focus on trying to fix the problem, it is easy to underestimate the power of simply being there. Most people don't want to be told what to do, but they do want someone to keep showing up, to check in and show they care. And number 9, supporting someone does not mean that you have to connect with big, intense conversations. Human connection in the smallest of moments matters. Walking while you're talking can help those who feel uncomfortable with opening up. You can also say nothing at all. Simply spending time together, even in silence, is okay. By being there, you're helping them to feel less alone and more cared for. I was thinking about how this proverb related to the life of Jesus, and it made me think of his experience in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's about to experience some of the worst physical suffering imaginable when he's abused during his trials and then ultimately, of course, in his crucifixion. But it's prior to that, in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he really has the moment of his greatest mental anguish. And it's a strange scenario in some ways. He wanted some time alone to pray, but he also didn't want to be totally alone. In Luke's Gospel it says that he withdrew from his disciples, but he took with him the three that were closest to him, Peter, James and John. And he says to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to his disciples, and he found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray, that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak." This is so instructive. There's really nothing practical that Peter, James and John could do to help Jesus in this moment, but he just wanted them there. And they wanted to support him, but they were exhausted and they fell asleep. And Jesus was then hurt that they couldn't watch with him just for 1 hour in that moment. Even though in the same breath he shows his compassion and his understanding that he realised they were exhausted, and also he acknowledges that they were willing. Sometimes it is exhausting to be in that supportive role, and you need to look after yourself as well, as Jesus says to his disciples here. But what the person that's suffering needs more than anything is just someone to be there for them, to have that sense that there's someone that cares, that is empathising with them in what they're going through. We really need to be aware of the mental health of those who are close to us. Don't be afraid to ask how someone is going, even if you don't feel like you have any answers or that you've got anything to offer. We won't always be able to avoid the worst, but we have to try. And it begins with sensitivity and awareness. In most cases, we can help those around us in small but meaningful ways. If you got value out of this video, give it a like, share it with someone else who you think might benefit from it. Subscribe to the channel to get a notification when new episodes are out. Take care, and God bless.